Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to help support the show by becoming a premium member, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast to sign up. Memberships are only $2.99 a month. By becoming a premium member, you'll be able to download episodes onto your mobile device and listen to them commercial-free wherever you go. Also, if you'd like to check out the new Dogman Encounters t-shirt store, please go to dogmanencounters.com/store and take a look around. Buying a t-shirt or sweatshirt there is another great way to help support the show. As always, thanks for listening. Alright, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Sara Clevenger. Sara, welcome to the show.
Hey Vic, thank you for having me on. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Thanks for your time. Sara, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I am 34 and I love cats, and I'm also the host of Paranormally Correct here on YouTube. I enjoy all things paranormal, especially Dogman. He's probably my favorite right now.
It's kind of hard to like Dogman if you like cats, isn't it?
I know it does seem a little contradictory, but I think as long as you keep them separated, I think it works.
Well, see, that's the problem, keeping them separated. As I'm sure you know, dogmen are pretty fond of cats, and not in a good way.
That's true.
Yeah, unfortunately. Like you said, you host a paranormal-themed show. Have you had many Dogman eyewitnesses on as guests?
I have had a couple, and I've also had a lot of viewers come to me, either by way of Facebook or private messages, other places and things like that. And they would tell me their stories. And a lot of them are very shy to tell them publicly. Some people enjoy telling them publicly, but others do not. So I have heard quite a few.
Since you've had your own encounter with the Dogman, do you think they have ethereal qualities, or do you think they're flesh and blood?
I kind of go back and forth on that. Sometimes when I hear certain stories, I think one thing, and then, sometimes I think the other. I think right now I'm kind of leaning towards there's some sort of created creature. And I'm really big into conspiracy theories, so I won't bore you with all that unless you really want to hear it. But that's kind of my theory on Dogman. I don't think that he's something that naturally occurs in nature, if that makes any sense.
That does make sense. And sure, I'd love to hear any theories you've got.
Okay, so here's my theory. And I haven't fleshed it out. It's very bare bones. But I believe that Dogman may possibly be some sort of biological weapon created by the government or, some secret organization, some type of military organization. Who knows? But I just think that it seems like it has the qualities of a lean, mean killing machine, to be quite frank. And also, I've heard a lot of stories and I've read a lot of stories about Dogmen being seen in different circumstances where they had weapons and armor. And I don't know if I truly buy into that, but if it's true, it could kind of lend something to my theory.
It's easy to think that there must be a biological weapon that was created in a lab at first glance, but as you delve deeper into it, to me it just doesn't make sense that that's what they are. I mean, sightings stretch all the way back into antiquity.
I know. And see, then I think about that and I think, well, that can't be the case, So, like I said, I kind of go back and forth about it, but I haven't decided yet what I really think that it might be.
Yeah, there are a lot of things about them that it's just so hard to put a finger on, so I totally understand. How much did you know about Dogman before you had that encounter?
When I had my first encounter, my only encounter with Dogman, I don't think that I knew anything about him. I feel like maybe I had heard that term possibly if, that term was popular at the time, because I've always been a paranormal buff. I've always been interested in this stuff. And, this was kind of before the internet days, before the internet was really a popular thing in every home. So obviously I didn't have that as a resource, but I feel like I had maybe heard something, along the lines of a Dogman, but I really didn't know much of anything.
It really is a shame that you didn't know about Dogman before you had that encounter. As the listeners are going to find out, your mom had her own encounter, and I wish she would have told you about her encounter before you had yours, but that's okay, we'll talk about that in a bit. Several of your relatives have had Dogman encounters of their own. Have you put much thought into how unusual that is?
I don't think that it really is, honestly, because where I had my sighting at is not really very far from where my mom's sighting was, but it was quite a few years in between because hers was possibly about 97, no later than 98. And then mine was around 2001 in the fall. And then as far as the other family member who's had one, I didn't know them back then. This is like, these people are a recent addition to my family, I guess you could say. And this was in a completely different part of Kentucky too. It was several hours away, I think around Garrett County, and I grew up around Elliott County. So I know that there have been sightings around both areas. At least I've heard people talk about that. So I think that it's probably more likely that around this time period, because they kind of all happened around the same time, I think there might have been an influx of dogmen, if that makes any sense. Well, maybe there could have been one just running around and wreaking havoc, or maybe there was a pack.
Unfortunately, there are tons of dogman encounters in Kentucky, so I guess maybe it shouldn't be all that surprising that your whole family, well, not your whole family, but a lot of your family members have had encounters with them.
Yeah, exactly.
We alluded to your mom's encounter. I was going to save that for later in the interview, but please tell us about it now. Okay,
so like I said before, I'm going to skip kind of the background as to why. We're going to jump right into where this happened. There's a long, boring story behind this, but long story short, my mom and my stepdad were sleeping in the car one night, and this was not too far from her home, the place she still lives. It was actually up on a place called Red Wine Hill, and I think you could probably Google that. I think it, might come up. I don't know. It's so secluded out there. Google probably hasn't made it that far into the woods, but if they have, you'll see what I'm talking about. So it wasn't too far from where I grew up. They were sleeping in the car one night. She said that it was in the fall, and there was a full moon, which I thought was interesting. So there was a full moon. She had leaned back in the seat and just closed her eyes to try to go to sleep. She said that she kind of, I don't know how to really describe this. She kind of sensed or seemed to pick up a little bit of movement out of the corner of her eye, even though they were closed. I know that may not make any sense, but I think I've experienced that before too. You can kind of feel if something's watching you or something's nearby, if something's out of the ordinary, or it maybe is just like a predator-prey instinct we have. But however it happened, she kind of sensed something outside the car door on the passenger side. And she said that she also noticed that it kind of eclipsed the moonlight since the moon was so bright. She said she opened her eyes and she looked out the windows to the side, to the left and right, and then she looked forward and she saw what she can only describe as a wolf man, basically, leaning over the quarter panel side of the car with his hands and forearms up on the glass. So the way she told this, God bless her, sometimes she doesn't articulate things really concisely. The way she told this, it makes me think that this thing was big enough that when it placed its arms and hands up on the window of the car, they actually stretched beyond the glass and onto the roof of the car. So she said that it's kind of in this position and it's looking straight through the glass, right into her eyes, and they make eye contact for a few seconds. She didn't really say how long, but she said that she felt like it was just staring into her soul. Whatever that means. I don't know. I've experienced anything like that myself, but she said that she felt like it was just staring into her, and not like eye contact you would make with a wild animal, a normal wild animal. So she continued. She said that the eyes were somewhat wolf-like, but they were also more human-like as well. She said they may have been like a greenish bluish. She wasn't entirely sure. She said that the body of it was dark and it looked a little mangy. So sporadic hair, I suppose, is what she meant. She said that it had very pointy ears. And she said what was really scary about the face, because she was very frightened by the face itself, and she still recalls it as being the most terrifying part about this experience. She said that it was like the face of a man with a dog snout attached to the face. So that to me sounds like a dog man. And she actually did tell me this story many years ago. She told me right after it happened. I didn't think anything of it. That's the thing about these kinds of experiences, I guess. Sometimes you don't really think too much into it until later, which was also kind of the case with me. So when she was telling me this story back in 97 or 98, I didn't really know anything about Dogman. It wasn't until this past summer when I was telling her that I had kind of discovered something about my own experience that she kind of was like, you know what? Maybe that's what I saw. because what I saw wasn't just a dog. It wasn't just a wolf. It had the face of a man. It had a weird snout. It was huge. It was just enormous and not like a normal dog. So after that, however many seconds this is happening and she's looking at this thing, she said that she kind of tapped my stepdad to try to wake him up. And this is how she told it. She said by the time he lifted up his shotgun, I guess from out from underneath the seat, they looked away probably for just a second and the thing was gone. It just vanished. No trace of it anywhere. So the place that they were at was kind of on a little bit of a clearing, but it's also, like I said, it's at the top of a mountain. So lots of places for a dogman to hide. And that was her experience.
Does your mom avoid going into the woods now that she knows they're out there?
I think at the time she did. I know she's always been an outdoorsy person, and I feel like she probably did, but I never really thought to ask her about that.
It really would be a shame, her loving the outdoors the way you say she does. It'd really be a shame if she couldn't enjoy that anymore because of that experience. If that was the case, I definitely would understand it, but like I said, it really would be a shame. From what I understand, your father-in-law had an encounter too. What can you tell us about his encounter?
He had a pretty good one. So first I got to tell you about him. He is a very logical person. He's a very intelligent person. He's not the kind of person who necessarily believes in all the fun paranormal things that I believe in, like ghosts and aliens and things like that. I definitely would not have ever suspected that he had a Dogman encounter or that he believed in Dogman. But we were talking about it recently, I think back in August. He jumped into the conversation and he's like, I think I've seen one. And so his story happened about the year 2000. Like I said, it was around Garrett County, maybe on the line of Jessamine County, somewhere around there. So 18 years ago, it was winter. And one of the things I always ask people is like, what time of the year was it? Because I feel like Dogman tends to come out around fall of the year. I don't know why I think that, but I kind of do. So he said it was winter. It wasn't snowing. It wasn't raining. It was a dry night, but very cold. So he said that he was traveling back towards Nicholasville on 27. He was about a half a mile from the river, if anybody's familiar with that area. He was doing about 30, 40 miles per hour. So it was about 4 a.m., maybe 5 a.m. So he's on this road, and this road is normally more popular. There's normally a little more traffic, and there's also a busy gas station there. So it was not quite as busy as it normally was. So he said as he was traveling, something crossed the road in front of him. But there were a few strange things about this animal crossing in front of him. First of all, he said it came from kind of an angle, almost like it was beside the car. It didn't run directly across the street in front of him. It actually came kind of up on him and around, if that makes any sense. And he said that it was so fast. This is what caught his attention, the speed of this creature and the amount of hair on this creature. He also said that he was able to get a good enough look at its chest to see that it had a really broad, unusually large chest, which I think is really interesting. He said that it was black and, like I said, very hairy. He kept emphasizing that, it was very densely hairy. And that's not necessarily a detail that I've heard attached to Dogman encounters, but, I think that there may be different types of Dogmen out there personally. So it was moving so quickly, he wasn't really able to see a lot of detail. He actually said that he couldn't even see the feet because it was so fast. He said it was just gone, just so quickly that he almost didn't really even get to look at it at all. And I just think that this is really a crazy story. And, I kind of wondered, I was like, well, what stood out to you about this? What was something that made you think this was not a normal animal? And he said just the fact that it came around him so quickly and just the look of it, the shaggy, hairy, big, bushy, broad chest look.
After he had that encounter in 2000, did you notice changes in his interest in doing things in the woods?
I didn't know him then. I actually didn't meet him until about 2014. But I know that he probably is an outdoors type person. I mean, if you live in Kentucky, you kind of have to be a little bit of an outdoorsy person. So I don't think that he really has shown any changes in interest as far as being outside or anything like that.
Oh, good. I'm glad it hasn't affected him that way. Has he been fairly open to talking about that encounter, or does he try to avoid the subject?
I think he was really open with me about it. If I had to guess, I would say that he probably doesn't tell that story to everybody. You know what I mean? He probably just felt comfortable sharing it with me because he knows that I love this stuff and I'm really interested in it. So.
Yeah, for obvious reasons, that's probably a pretty good idea not to share that experience with everyone he meets. I understand.
Right.
Does he seem to have a strong interest in learning as much as he can about them now that he's seen one with his own eyes?
I feel like he's pretty interested in a lot of the stuff that I've told him, things that I've learned and things that I've experienced. I feel like he enjoys hearing about it and talking about it. I think if he had more encounters, he would probably be more vocal and open about it as well.
I wonder if he realizes that once you've had an encounter with the Dogman, that does open up the gates and make you a lot more likely to have another encounter compared to someone who's never had an encounter to start with.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that it kind of seems to me like in my experience, once you see one, you're almost bound to see another at some point. It's almost like they remember you or maybe they look for you or something. I don't know, but it kind of seems like there's a correlation there.
Yeah, it sure does seem that way. Does he know that having one encounter tends to predispose you to having other encounters?
I don't know. I don't think he's really ever thought about all of this in, I guess you could say, more technical terms. I think he, just thought about the story as we were talking about the topic, and I don't know if he's really thought that far into it.
I see. Before you tell us about your encounter, please tell us about the place where it happened.
So my encounter took place on yet another rural road out in Kentucky. It was between Round County and Elliott County, Kentucky, on 173, also known as Christie Creek. I was a senior in high school. Me and my best friend were going to go out and run around Moorhead for the night. It was a Friday night. This was in September, as after school had started. And we were just so excited to be almost ready to graduate. We had our driver's license. We had a little more freedom, We just were having a blast on a Friday night. And we went out that night and we did normal teenager things, and we had no idea what was going to happen on the way home. So it was probably about 10:30, maybe 11. I want to say that it was probably about 10:30 because I think our curfew was around 11, which would make sense. It's about 25, 30 minutes from where we live. So we're traveling east on this road back toward Elliott County. And there are parts of this road where they're small neighborhoods. There are parts of this road where it's just like gaps of nothing. It just goes through the trees and close to like a big creek and a big mountain. And a lot of it is very deserted. You would think on a Friday night there would be a lot of traffic, but not on this road. That's the thing about small towns and stuff, I guess, is that it's not the busiest place to be. So we were on the road alone that night. There wasn't any other traffic anywhere in sight for a great deal of time. So we're traveling probably at about 60 miles an hour. I know we were speeding because we were goofing off and being teenagers. We came around a curve. We got to a straight stretch. We were talking and laughing, having a good time. We've always been cautious. Like everybody I know in Kentucky is very cautious of deer. They're a big problem here. And you're almost guaranteed to see at least one on every trip. I saw one just a few minutes ago. So especially this time of the year, they come out and they just stand around on the road. So I thought I saw something and it caught my attention because I've always been trained to watch for deer, especially on those kinds of roads. So I remember looking up, and this all happened really fast. I looked up and I saw something, but the headlights weren't hitting it enough. This is like a second, 2 seconds. I see what looks like this large thing sprawled across our lane. So this highway is not like a big 2-lane on each side highway. It's a highway, but it's just 1 lane going and 1 lane coming. So this thing is laying in the road. Part of it stretched off the side of the bank into the grass, and another part of it stretched across the yellow line. So I don't know if that would make it like 10 foot long, 8 foot long. I'm not entirely sure how long that would make it, but fairly big. I've never seen an animal that size, of course. So again, this is all happening very quickly. Before I can shout out, hey, there's something in the road, she hits it. We hit it in this small Mustang. Mustangs are low to the ground. So this was a bumpy impact. It was very bumpy. She hit it with all 4 tires. And my first thought was, we've killed a person and we've probably busted our oil pan. You know, we're stranded with a dead body. You know, just being totally irrational, I guess, because I was 17. And we stopped. We slammed on the brakes just a little ways up the road. And I usually, just to be generous, I say maybe a quarter of a mile or something. I don't know. Not that far. It was probably a few hundred feet. We stop and we turn in a gravel driveway. We come back as quickly as we possibly can, because here we're kind of thinking, was that a person? It kind of looked like a person. We get back to the spot and there's nothing. No blood, nothing in the road. I mean, you would think if you hit an animal or a person laying in the road, there would be blood and there would probably be a body, but there was nothing. So on one side of this road, there's a big field and a big creek. On the other side is a very steep hill. And if you've never been to Kentucky, you probably can't really visualize this. You can Google it. That might help. But this hill, basically the road drops off into a small ditch and goes straight up. And it's mostly rock and trees. An animal could probably climb it, but I don't know what kind of animal. So this thing basically had two options: go through this big field and this pretty wide rushing creek, or go up the side of the mountain. Therefore, I think that it's very strange that it disappeared so quickly. I would probably say that it probably headed toward the creek if I was guessing. But that, I feel like we would have seen it, you know, because there's a field out there, but it's a pretty big field. So then I got to think, it's like, well, it must be fast, right? And again, at this time, we had no idea what this thing was. We were thinking either it was a really tall person laying in the street, or it was an alligator. We don't have alligators in Kentucky, but the reason we thought maybe an alligator is because one detail that I did see about this thing was that its arms and legs kind of bent in a funny way. It was on its belly and it was crawling, but its elbows kind of bent, not so much like a human, but maybe more like a dog. You know how a dog can kind of get down on its belly and kind of inch its way just by crawling and wiggling. It was kind of like that. So kind of also like an alligator, if that makes any sense. And that's why we thought maybe it was, if somebody had an exotic pet, it escaped, they evicted it, you know. We had no idea. And at the time, we would have never guessed Dogman. That's the last thing we would have ever thought of. So we didn't know what to do about it. We went home. It was just something weird that happened. All these years later, that was when I was 17 years old. I'm 34 now. And I did not realize until this past summer that that was more than likely a Dogman. And the reason I realized that is because I was browsing the internet and I found Dogman encounters with you and I became hooked immediately. I just love your channel. I love listening to your shows. And as I started listening more and more, I felt like it just kind of popped in my head. I just had an epiphany. I was like, oh my God, that's what I saw. This creature that's been a mystery for all of these years, that's what I saw. And from that point on, I just feel like that's definitely for certain what I saw.
When you finally found out that it was a Dogman that you had seen that night, was it all negative as far as your response went, or was there any kind of a positive spin to that?
I don't really think there was anything, because there's, you know, I hadn't told a lot of people personally that story. I did write a book a few years ago, and it was one of the stories. And I called it, the title of the story was Christie Creek Gator Man, because we thought it was a gator. But whoever read that book, they're never going to know, probably, unless they find me now and they kind of put two and two together, like, oh, hey, she figured out the mystery animal. That's great. But it really was positive for me because it really kind of pushed me into this world of Dogman. And I think that it's just such a fascinating place to be. And I think that it's a prominent topic right now. I think that there's really a lot of Dogman activity these days. So for me, it was a positive, if that makes any sense.
If any of the listeners want to read Christie Creek Gator Man, how can they do that?
They can go over to facebook.com/paranormally correct. And I have actually posted all of the individual chapters of that book in note form on Facebook. So all of those are there. They'll probably be on my blog as well pretty soon, which is paranormallycorrect.com. You can look for it over there in probably a month or two. But as of right now, it's on Facebook.
Well, that makes it easy.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted everybody to be able to read it for free because I just felt like these stories need to be shared. And it's been a long time since the book was released. And I'm not doing anything with it. And I was like, I've got to get these stories out here for this new audience that I have when I started my YouTube channel. So that's why I've kind of put them online for free.
Well, that's awfully nice of you, and I'll bet it's a good read.
Yeah, it's a wild one, to say the least.
I'll bet. How did your mom react when you came home and told her about your encounter?
The night that it happened, I think she probably just was like, oh, well, that's weird. I don't know what that could be. Because, of course, I really had no idea how to explain it to her. And I don't think she thought that she probably, honestly, I mean, let's be real. She probably thought I was trying to come up with a reason for being a little late, more than likely, and missing curfew. So who knows? Maybe she thought I was lying. Maybe she believed me. Maybe because of her experience. My mom's had a lot of weird paranormal and supernatural experiences and extraterrestrial. So she's kind of on the same page with me as far as this stuff goes. She's not the kind of person who doesn't believe any sort of unusual story.
It kind of makes me wonder if she didn't feel some form of relief because, as you know, misery loves company, and since she had that encounter of her own, maybe that made her feel better.
It possibly could have, yeah. And I think, too, a lot of it is that because she's kind of accustomed to having strange experiences and things that, most people don't experience, most people wouldn't want to believe. I think that me having them was probably not much of a surprise to her. She probably expected, as I grew older, I would have more and more experiences too. And I know that my brother and sister have also had a lot of unusual paranormal supernatural experiences. So I think our whole family, for some reason, is really close to that realm for whatever. I don't know why. I have no idea why, but we've all had a lot of experiences.
It sure sounds like you have. Did you ever try to find out if other Dogman encounters have happened in the area where you had yours? If so, what did you find out?
I have never really talked to anybody from around that area. I would like to. That's something that I might try to do in the future. I've heard hunters, I've heard random people off and on throughout some period of time say that they've seen strange creatures, strange wildlife type creatures. A lot of people say, well, it's like a big cat, or it's around here for whatever reason. A lot of elderly people would call them panthers or something like that. They kind of had a weird, varied word for whatever this creature was. Maybe it was the same creature. I don't know. I'm not saying it is, but it could be. But I've heard about weird animals, and I guess you could even say cryptids, for a long time in eastern Kentucky. And I even heard a story many years ago that there was some sort of humongous cat type animal in a county not too far away from where my experience and my mom's experience happened. So I kind of, just looking back on it, I kind of wonder now, is that a Dogman, or was that just a big cat? It makes you suspicious, because we know those things are out there. I mean, anybody who's seen them around this area, I think they stick around, and I think there are a few of us out there who know for sure that they exist, and they are living in the hills of Kentucky somewhere.
Yeah, there are a lot of strange things that go on in Kentucky, no denying that. What are your thoughts on the Monroe County attacks? I know you've done some research into what happened there.
My thoughts, part of me wants to just say Dogman, definitely a Dogman, because this is too weird. And then the follow-up events or other attacks afterwards, it just sounds to me like the work of a Dogman. But then I try to also, because I'm a skeptic, I try to also look at it, from other people's point of view and say, well, okay, maybe there's evidence for this or that. Maybe it is possible that it was some other type of animal. But I think what really changed my mind the most about it and kind of made me set in my ways, I guess you could say, is that we have a group of authorities saying that the murders were done by a human. And then we have another authority saying, no, these are not from a human. A human did not do this, and a big cat did not do this. We think a wild animal did it, but we don't think it was a big cat. So I think that there's a lot going on down there. I think that there's something maybe that we don't know. Maybe unless you're like a local, you don't really know all the details of it. But I think there's something really suspicious about it, especially because of the conflicting comments from the authorities.
Oh, it's definitely something strange. Yeah, I don't think we're talking about a coyote that did all that.
Oh, absolutely not. I don't think a coyote at all could even come close. I don't really think that a bobcat or a mountain lion or, any kind of, any of the usual suspects, I don't think they could ever do that. I mean, my first thought was, okay, we have 3 horses and 2 dogs. If this was a bear or a big cat, it would have come into the area, maybe looking for food, maybe snooping, maybe it just got lost, and it might have got into a spat with one of the animals and maybe not even fatally wounded one of the animals. But here we have what looks like a kill for sport, all 3 horses and 2 dogs. I mean, that seems intentional. Personally, I think so.
Oh, sure. Yeah, a mountain lion or a bear. Yeah, they wouldn't do that.
Exactly. And I think that's what really stands out to me about that whole situation, regardless of anything else.
Oh, no doubt. You had another unusual experience this summer you think was Dogman related. Please tell us about what happened that time.
Yeah, this happened over the summer. We came back from Florida. We lived in a place temporarily owned by friends. We just kind of lived there just until we could figure out what our next step was in life, basically. And from the time we moved in there was some weird stuff going on. The place had a lot of big windows and it had a big glass door. It was actually a double door, and it was really far out in the middle of nowhere. And it was out kind of on top of it. I don't know if I call it a mountain, but probably a mountain, to be honest, because that whole region is very mountainous. So it didn't feel like you were on a mountain. It felt like you're on a hill, but we were kind of at the top and we were in sort of a clearing, and there was a lot of farmland close to us. We had, big farms across the street, behind us, down the street. They were just everywhere. So lots of livestock, lots of dogs, lots of everything, lots of people. A lot of the neighbors had multiple dogs. And I think one of our neighbors across the street had probably a whole kennel full, because when they would bark, it just sounded like a big doggy choir, So we noticed pretty early on that the dogs would all go haywire about the same time all together, whether it was daytime, nighttime, whatever. I also felt very uneasy there. And I did on multiple occasions see a UFO. And I don't know if it was the same UFO. In my experience, it probably was. I don't know. Some people get that, some people won't. But I knew something really peculiar was going on out there. In this particular town, I've had a lot of weird experiences in as well in the past. So I kept telling Matt for a while. I was like, Matt, I feel like something's looking through the window at me. I just feel like I'm being watched. I feel like there's something going on. As soon as the sun goes down, it gets creepy out here, especially after midnight. And there are a few times where my cats, I think, would have agreed with me, because one particular, I don't know, I think it was probably evening or dark. One of my oldest cats he always liked to sit at the back door and look out, how cats are. And he was sitting there just like normal. And then all of a sudden he became so terrified that he just was tearing up carpet, just burning a path, burning a path away from this door and up the stairs to get away from the door. He was terrified. I mean, it was the most weird thing I've ever seen a cat do. And I've seen cats do some weird stuff. And I thought maybe he saw a neighbor dog, a horse, a multitude of things he could have possibly saw. But I thought that was really peculiar. And I didn't think too much of it until later on. But it was pretty strange because he's a pretty passive, cool, calm, collected cat. So then there were some other times where my other cat, I have 4 cats, but one of my 4 cats, a different cat, Naples. Well, I'll just call them by their names. So the first story was about Percy. This one's about Naples. Naples is a very smart cat. She thinks things through. She's, sometimes a little manipulative. So she's a very intelligent cat. And she got in the habit of going to the window and pawing, just standing up on her hind feet and pawing as fast and hard as she could at the window. And a lot of times at night, we would go and look out the window, turn on the lights. It was very dark out there. There wasn't a whole lot of light on our side of the street, like around the duplex where we live. Some of the neighbors in the distance had some security lights, but we didn't really have a lot of light directly in our front yard or anything. So we would always try to just shine a flashlight, turn on any kind of light we possibly could to check the yard to see what was in the yard. We were never really able to see anything, so we kind of dismissed that as maybe possibly just being, a stray cat causing her to act funny. So then the weird part happened. This was, I think, 1 or 2 days after the Monroe County attacks. It was on a Monday night. So it was the Monday immediately after the Monroe County attacks. I was doing my live stream, which I do every Monday night on my YouTube channel. And my husband had gone outside downstairs. I was upstairs. He was downstairs. He had gone out. He was outside. He liked to go out. We like to sit on the back porch and stuff like that. We spent a lot of time outdoors there, mostly through the day. It was a little creepy, like I said, after dark. So he went out on this particular night. The moon was not out, so there was basically no light in our front yard. It was very dark. The only light he could see was coming from a farm, which was basically diagonal. Like if you walked out on our front porch and you looked diagonally across the street, there was a farm that sat way back in a field. So there was also the fence. I can't remember what they call that kind of fence, but there's Lexington and Richmond and stuff are kind of notorious for their white fences, and black fences around their horse farms. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. So there was a fence that kind of run the perimeter there on each side of the street. So he's standing there in pitch black darkness and he hears something. That whole evening, the dogs had been kind of boisterous as well. I should throw that in probably. So he's standing there. He hears this weird noise. And the only way he can describe it is like the sound of kind of a chicken coo, only really throaty. And it sounded like it was coming from a big animal. So this is not like, just a chicken with a deep voice. This was something that kind of made, made a sound similar to a chicken, but a little creepy, I guess you could say. Sometimes it's hard to describe these types of things, but that's, pretty much what he came up with. So he stopped for a second and he listened. He said about 5-6 seconds after he hears this thing, he hears it again, only this time it's closer. And he said it sounded like it was pretty close to our driveway, probably a little ways across the street. So he's freaking out. He's thinking, uh-oh, what is this? Is this some kind of Dogman? Because this is around the time period where I got interested in Dogman. And I always say that this is kind of terrible timing for him to have an experience like this because it sounds like we're making it up, to be totally honest. But this really happened. And, I think I kind of have a theory that with any supernatural creature, the more time you spend thinking about them, the more likely you are to draw them in. And like we kind of mentioned earlier in the show, if you see one, you're probably going to see another. Maybe you'll have 2 experiences instead of just one. Maybe it's more likely. So he's standing there, he hears this noise, and then all of a sudden, this thing takes off running. So to try to describe this, you have to understand kind of the terrain around our front yard. If you look, like I said, diagonally across the street, the fence ran around like a big field in a farm. So the farm was probably, a football field and a half away or something thereabouts. But they have a lot of security lights and lights on their buildings and things like that, porch lights. So he could see, if he looked toward those lights, he could see this figure, this large, dark figure, just kind of eclipse the light, like it was running closer to the foreground of where he was looking. Of course, the lights were further back in the field, but this thing is running along the fence line and it just took off. And the direction it headed really doesn't make a lot of sense for it to be like a person or, really anything, because it was headed toward another farm, which is further back across the street, like directly across the street. So we kind of thought this was peculiar. Obviously, like I said, it wouldn't be a person. Definitely not a person running around out there in the field in the middle of the night. And if it was, we'd have heard about it on the news the next day because that kind of stuff just doesn't happen around Kentucky. He ran inside the house. It scared him so bad. And he's not one to really get scared that often. He's pretty brave. So this must have been something that really got to him or got under his skin because it did frighten him quite a bit to the point that he ran in the house and closed the door. We don't really know a whole lot else about this thing. We never saw anything else like this. I certainly never saw anything. I did hear a lot of weird stuff. I heard a lot of weird animal noises. And, I'm not someone who necessarily is very familiar with the outdoors. I don't really go hunting. I don't like to go camping. I've never been the kind of person to do that kind of stuff. The most I've ever done is play in a creek when I was a kid growing up. But Matt, he grew up on a farm. He grew up out in the woods, in a very secluded place. And he is familiar with sounds of the forest, I guess you could say. So he said that this was not like any animal he had ever heard in his life. This didn't sound Although it did kind of relate to a chicken a little. He kind of uses a chicken to get the point across. It was not a chicken. Definitely not a chicken. Definitely not a person. Deer don't make those types of noises. Cow, it wouldn't have been a cow because that would have been clearly obvious. You could hear the hoofs running. So this one really baffled us. We didn't really know what to make of this, except it was peculiar that about 2 hours away, just a day or so before that, the Monroe County attacks had happened.
Yeah, that is peculiar. From what Matt saw of the subject's size and shape as it ran away, did it look to him like it might have more likely been a Sasquatch than a Dogman? I ask that because Sasquatch, as I'm sure you know, they're known to imitate chickens while Dogmen aren't.
You know, that's something that we have thought about, and we've kind of decided that it has to fall to one of those things. Those are about the only logical explanations. It's either been a Dogman or it was a Squatch.
I'd bet you good money it actually was a Sasquatch and not a Dogman. The imitating part where it imitated a chicken, to me, that's kind of the tip that says it's got to be a Sasquatch.
That's a really good observation, actually. I never thought of that. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'll bet you that's what it was. Before we get out of here, Sarah, please tell the listeners how they can listen to your show. And then after you've done that, please give us any closing comments you might like to share.
So if you want to come over to Paranormally Correct, all you got to do is type in Paranormally Correct in your YouTube search bar. I live stream on Monday nights at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We talk about a different paranormal topic every week. I invite guests on if they want to come on and talk about something. So it's always an open platform for everybody. And then sometimes I do some live streams over on the Facebook page. And that's about it. That's my show.
From what I hear, you're scheduling some kind of a boring guest that's going to be on your show soon. Why'd you decide to do that?
Oh, I think I have a very, very fascinating guest coming up very soon.
Well, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited. And I'm going to be so nervous because I'm going to fanboy out. No kidding.
Oh, come on now. It's not like that.
It's going to be awesome. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Well, I'm going to do my best to be over whatever this is that I have right now, so I put on a good performance for you.
Yeah, I hope you get to feeling better. I really do. I know it's that time of the year for terrible bacterias and spores and all those crazy things to get up your nose. So hopefully you get to feeling better.
Well, thank you. I'll try. Well, having said that, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share before we get out of here?
My only closing comment would be number one, if you believe in Dogman, be careful because he's out there. He's an apex predator and he will murder you. I think that he's a very dangerous creature and he really does exist. And if you don't believe in Dogman, I hope that you don't have any experiences. I hope that you can continue to not believe in Dogman and stay safe out there, everybody, whether you believe in him or not.
Wow, Sarah, that's a pretty ominous set of closing comments there, but...
I know. I'm sorry. It's just like it's on my mind all the time. Like Dogman is out there and he will get you if you go into his part of the woods.
Well, I hope it's not that bad, but well said nonetheless.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on and I hope I'm not too ominous.
Oh, no, not at all. It's been great having you on, and like I told you before, thanks again so much for your time. Have a great night.
You too. Bye.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.